Carl Jung discovered that you can see a person's true character through just two hidden windows. Not their words, not their accomplishments, not even the actions they carefully choose when others are watching. Jung realized that human nature always slips through in ways people cannot control. Picture this. You're sitting across from someone you thought you knew well, a colleague, a close friend, maybe even your partner. Their behavior seems flawless, their appearance genuine, their story consistent, but something unsettles you. You can't put it into words, yet your intuition whispers that what you're seeing is not the whole truth. Jung spent decades studying what he called the persona, the mask each of us wears to navigate society. This mask isn't necessarily false, it's a social performance, a survival strategy. But Jung uncovered something far more unsettling. No matter how carefully a person constructs their mask, two specific psychological patterns always reveal what lies beneath it. And most people give away these secrets without realizing it. These two windows aren't complicated psychological tests. They don't require therapy sessions or long assessments. They are simple, observable patterns that surface in everyday life, in the smallest interactions, moments when a person's defenses weaken, when stress rises, or when instinct overrides calculation. Here's the paradox Jung left us with. Once you understand these two windows, you don't just read others more clearly, you're also forced to confront yourself. Because the same patterns that betray another person's mask will also betray yours. Jung warned that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. These character reveals demand exactly that, the courage to look into mirrors we've spent years avoiding. By the end of this journey, you'll have a framework that allows you to see beyond surface impressions. You'll be able to recognize the hidden architecture of character in colleagues, friends, strangers, and most importantly, in yourself. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every human being carries two faces. The first is the one we present to the world, the polished version of ourselves that we want others to see. The second is the hidden self that operates beneath the surface, often outside of our own awareness. Carl Jung called the public face the persona. It is the mask we construct to survive in society, to be accepted, admired, or at least tolerated. The persona is not inherently false. In fact, it serves an important function. We need it to play our roles: the professional who stays composed under pressure, the parent who models strength for their children, the friend who listens patiently even when exhausted. This social mask helps us fit into the world. But here's the problem. The persona is not the whole truth. It is a performance layer, carefully crafted to hide the raw, complex, contradictory reality of who we really are. Most people believe they can judge character by studying the performance layer. They look for confidence in someone's voice, kindness in their gestures, consistency in their stories. They assume that success, charm, or charisma reflect what lies beneath. But Jung understood something different. These surface traits are the easiest to manipulate. Anyone can rehearse confidence. Anyone can simulate warmth. Anyone can stage authenticity if they're skilled enough at performance. The true self lives deeper, in the unconscious patterns that slip through when the mask cracks. That is where character is revealed. Not in the speeches someone has practiced, but in the reactions they can't control. And this is why Jung's discovery is so powerful. No matter how polished a persona becomes, two specific patterns always leak through. They act like psychological fingerprints. They cannot be rehearsed, cannot be polished, cannot be hidden forever. Think of it this way. If the persona is the costume, these two reveals are the torn seams that show the fabric underneath. The longer you observe, the more inevitable it becomes that you will catch sight of the real person. And once you learn to recognize the difference between the performance and the authentic signal, you'll realize how much of what we take at face value is simply illusion. This is the first shift in perspective, to stop judging people by their performance layer. To realize that the polished version is just the opening act, Jung's framework invites us to go further, to look past the mask and see the raw material of character. Not the person they want to be seen as, but the person they cannot help being when no one is watching. And to make this real, Jung identified the first hidden window, the phenomenon of projection, what we might call shadow mapping. It is the doorway through which someone's unconscious reveals itself, and it happens far more often than you realize. Carl Jung discovered that the fastest way to glimpse a person's inner world is not to study their behavior when they are calm, but to watch how they judge others. He called this phenomenon projection, the unconscious act of casting parts of ourselves, especially the parts we deny or repress, onto the people around us. Think about it. Every day, we react to people without realizing why. We say, she's so fake, he's manipulative, they're selfish. But Jung realized that these judgments often reveal more about the person making them than about the target. In fact, he wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Our harshest criticisms are rarely about others alone. They are reflections of our own disowned traits, the qualities we've buried because they don't fit the image we want to maintain. This is the first hidden window, shadow mapping. To see someone's shadow, pay attention to who they judge most intensely and why. Emotional intensity is the key. Casual observations tell you little, but when someone's reaction is sharp, when their voice tightens, when their eyes flash with irritation, that's when you're seeing their unconscious material spilling out. Here's how it works. If someone constantly condemns arrogance in others, chances are they're struggling with their own relationship to confidence. If they attack dishonesty with unusual ferocity, they may be denying the lies they tell themselves. If they sneer at people who crave attention, they may be hiding their own unmet need for validation. The stronger the reaction, the closer it points to the repressed trait. But Jung also discovered that projection is not only negative. Sometimes we push away our most admirable qualities because they feel too risky to own. When a person endlessly praises others, she's so talented, he's unbelievably confident, they're naturally creative, they may actually be projecting their own undeveloped potential. They admire in others what they secretly long to embody. The pedestal can be just as revealing as the criticism. Think back on your own reactions. Who irritates you more than anyone else? Whose success makes you strangely uncomfortable? Whose behavior triggers an outsized emotional response in you? According to Jung, these moments are not accidents, they are mirrors. They reveal the qualities you've buried, the parts of yourself you either despise or secretly wish you had the courage to express. Shadow mapping works because projection is automatic. It bypasses conscious control. You don't choose what irritates you or who you idolize. Those reactions emerge spontaneously. And that spontaneity is what makes projection so reliable as a window into character. A person can fake politeness, but they can't fake the spike of anger in their voice when someone touches a nerve. They can rehearse confidence, but they can't rehearse the jealousy that flares when someone else outshines them. This is why shadow mapping is such a powerful tool. If you learn to listen carefully, not just to words but to emotional intensity, people will tell you their secrets without realizing it. Every judgment is a confession. Every harsh criticism is a breadcrumb trail into the unconscious. And every pedestal is an invitation to see hidden potential. In the next chapter, we'll bring this concept to life with a story, a case study that shows how projection plays out in real time, and why noticing it can change the way you see both others and yourself. To understand shadow mapping in action, let's step into a familiar scene via an office meeting. Meet David, a successful architect, respected by colleagues, admired for his integrity. To most people, David looks like the definition of reliability. He is precise, disciplined, and carries himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knows he has earned his position. But there's one problem. Every time Marcus, a colleague in the same firm, enters the room, something shifts in David. Marcus is charismatic. He has an ease with clients, a natural ability to connect, to tell stories, to make people feel heard. He doesn't work harder than David. He doesn't even have more experience. But Marcus has that one intangible quality, charm. When Marcus receives praise, David's jaw tightens. When Marcus is complimented on his presentation, David's tone sharpens as he mutters something about manipulation. In every meeting, David finds a way to highlight Marcus's flaws. He's so fake. He's always playing people. You can't trust a word he says. To the casual observer, This looks like professional rivalry, but to Jung it was a textbook example of projection. David's anger wasn't really about Marcus. It was about David's own rejected qualities. Deep down, David wanted to be more socially fluent, to carry charm as effortlessly as Marcus did. But because he valued integrity above all else, he buried that desire. To him, charm felt dishonest. So instead of owning that conflict, David projected it outward, condemning Marcus for the very trait he secretly longed for. This is the essence of negative projection. The traits we dislike most in others often mirror the traits we deny in ourselves. Jung wrote, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." David's condemnation of Marcus wasn't liberating him, it was chaining him to an unconscious conflict. By attacking Marcus, he was really attacking himself. But projection doesn't only take the form of harsh criticism. Sometimes it hides in admiration. Imagine someone who constantly places others on pedestals, calling them brilliant, confident, creative, inspiring. This isn't always harmless praise. Often, it's a sign of positive projection. Just as we disown traits we despise, we can also disown traits we admire but feel afraid to embody. If David were projecting positively, he might say, "Marcus is so incredible with clients. I could never do what he does." What he wouldn't realize is that this statement is less about Marcus's ability and more about his own. The potential for charm exists within David. The reason he notices it so intensely is because, at some level, he already carries it. He just hasn't claimed it yet. This is the dual nature of shadow mapping. Every intense reaction, whether negative or positive, reveals something about the self. Hatred signals a rejected quality. Admiration signals a hidden potential. Both are windows into character. The tragedy is that most people never see this. They live their lives convinced that their judgments are accurate readings of others, when in truth they are roadmaps of their own unconscious. They blame, they praise, they condemn, never realizing that what they are really describing is themselves. David's story is not unique. We all have a Marcus, someone whose presence bothers us more than it should, someone who stirs irritation or envy that feels disproportionate. Jung would tell us to look closer, because in that reaction lies the shadow. And if we're willing to face it, the shadow can become not just a mirror, but a guide to growth. Carl Jung understood that the persona, the mask we wear to function in society, requires constant maintenance. Most of us spend enormous amounts of energy keeping that mask in place, projecting confidence when we feel insecure, acting calm when we're anxious, pretending we have it together when we're falling apart inside. The persona is useful, but it's fragile. And the moment it is threatened, our true character slips through. This is the second hidden window, mask maintenance under threat. The principle is simple. When a person's carefully crafted image is challenged, their authentic patterns emerge. The polished mask may hold in ordinary circumstances, but under stress, under scrutiny, or under criticism, the unconscious steps in and reveals the truth. Think about the moments when someone is caught off guard, when their competence is questioned in front of others, when they make a mistake they can't hide, when they are criticized publicly, or when their authority is undermined. In those moments, the mask cracks. You can see defensiveness flare, hostility rise, or insecurity bleed through. These reactions are not rehearsed. They are instinctive. They reveal character more reliably than years of surface interaction. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But most people spend that lifetime maintaining who they think they should be, and the cost is enormous. To hold up an image, you must repress what doesn't fit the picture. You must defend, deny, and deflect whenever reality threatens the mask. That defensive energy leaves a trace. Tone changes, micro-expressions, nervous laughter, a sudden shift in body language. If you learn to spot them, these traces are unmistakable. Consider the small cracks you see every day. Someone waits longer than expected and suddenly snaps, even though they usually seem patient. A phone dies, and the person who seemed composed becomes restless and irritable without their digital lifeline. A joke falls flat, and beneath the forced laugh you glimpse insecurity or resentment. These are not random slips. They are moments when the persona collapses under pressure and the authentic self pushes through. The critical insight here is that mask maintenance is unsustainable. You can polish a persona for years, but the unconscious does not stay silent. Stress, criticism, and surprise create conditions where the real character emerges. Some people respond with defensiveness, some with aggression, some with avoidance, and a rare few with authenticity, pausing, reflecting, and responding honestly. Jung believed that these moments are tests of integration. If the outer mask and the inner self are aligned, the reaction remains consistent. But if the persona is only a costume, the crack reveals how much of the person is still fragmented. This is why second reveals are so powerful. They don't come when people are prepared, they come when people are exposed. And in that exposure, you can see who they really are, not the actor on stage, but the human being behind the mask. To see mask maintenance in action, let's step into another real-world scenario. Meet Sarah, a marketing director with a reputation for being calm, professional, and unshakable. In every meeting, she radiates composure. She listens attentively, speaks with measured confidence, and never raises her voice. To colleagues, Sarah seems like the model of stability, the kind of leader who never cracks under pressure. But one day, during a high-stakes presentation with an important client, that mask slipped. The client criticized her team's strategy, suggesting that Sarah had overlooked key details. In an instant, her voice sharpened. Her posture stiffened. She interrupted mid-sentence, deflecting blame onto her team members. She even made subtle jabs at the client's past decisions. The calm, unflappable professional was gone. What emerged instead was someone defensive, insecure, and willing to sacrifice her team to protect her image. From Jung's perspective, this single moment revealed more about Sarah's authentic character than years of polished performance. When her persona was threatened, the unconscious patterns she normally kept hidden burst to the surface. It wasn't the client's criticism that exposed her, it was her own reaction. This is what makes the second window so revealing. The mask doesn't break during rehearsed moments, but in unexpected ones, and you don't need to wait for a high-stakes meeting to see it happen. It occurs in the tiny cracks of everyday life, moments so small that most people overlook them. Here are some of those everyday micro-moments when the mask slips, when technology fails. The composed professional becomes anxious, irritable, or visibly frustrated the second their phone dies or the Wi-Fi drops. When recognition is missing, someone tells a story, expects laughter, but silence follows. For a split second, their expression reveals insecurity or resentment. When patience runs thin, waiting in line, being put on hold, or dealing with delays, the polite exterior suddenly gives way to sharp comments or hostile body language. When control is lost, a plan changes unexpectedly, or a mistake is exposed, you can see whether the person adapts with honesty or lashes out to protect the mask. These micro moments are gold for character assessment. They are windows into who someone is when the performance layer collapses. Watch for the tone shift, the tightening jaw, the nervous tapping of fingers. These are tells of the authentic self trying to break through the persona. Jung warned that maintaining a false image consumes tremendous psychological energy. That's why stress so reliably exposes the truth. The system simply runs out of fuel, defenses crumble, and what's underneath, whether aggression, insecurity, dishonesty, or maturity, becomes visible. The most integrated individuals, those who have confronted their shadow and accepted their contradictions, respond differently. When their mask is threatened, they don't snap, deflect, or attack. They pause. They breathe. They choose authenticity over performance. Their reaction aligns with the persona they've built because there's nothing left to hide. This is the key distinction. The mask slipping doesn't just reveal flaws, it reveals the gap between who someone pretends to be and who they really are. And the size of that gap tells you how integrated or fragmented their character is. Carl Jung believed that the real test of character is not whether we have a shadow, and everyone does, but how we respond when that shadow is revealed. This is where the two hidden windows converge. Shadow mapping shows what someone rejects in themselves by projecting it onto others. Mask maintenance shows how someone reacts when their image is threatened. Put them together, and you have the most powerful character assessment of all, the integration test. The integration test is simple in theory, but profound in practice. It asks, when confronted with your own unconscious material, do you defend against it, or do you integrate it? Here's how it works. Imagine you notice someone judging others with unusual intensity. Instead of arguing or accusing them, you reflect it back with curiosity. You might say, "You seem really bothered by people who show off. Do you ever feel like you've wanted to show off but held yourself back? This is not an attack, it's not a trap. It's a mirror held gently in front of them, and their reaction reveals everything." Take David, the architect who judged his colleague Marcus for being fake. If asked whether he ever wished he could be more socially skilled, David could respond in one of two ways. The defensive pattern. "Are you saying I'm fake like him? That's ridiculous. I'm authentic, not like Marcus." In this response, David rejects the mirror entirely. He doubles down on his persona, protecting it at all costs. Jung would call this rigidity a sign of being trapped in unconscious projection. Growth here is nearly impossible because the person refuses to face what is theirs. The integrative pattern. Actually, yes. Sometimes I do wish I was better with people. I admire Marcus's skills, even though they frustrate me. Maybe I'm jealous of something I never allowed myself to develop. In this response, David acknowledges the truth in the mirror. He doesn't collapse in shame or lash out in denial. He holds the paradox. Marcus bothers him, but Marcus also reflects something he secretly longs for. This ability to admit complexity signals psychological maturity. Jung insisted that this was the path to individuation, becoming whole. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and the integration test demands exactly that. Not perfection, not performance, but acceptance of one's contradictions. From these responses, three distinct character types emerge. The unconscious type. This person is completely unaware of their projections. When confronted, they react with hostility, denial, or blame. They live entirely at the mercy of their unconscious, the aware but defended type. They intellectually recognize that they have patterns, but cannot integrate them emotionally. They might say, yes, I judge people too much, but nothing changes because the awareness never penetrates deeper than words. The integrated type. This person can look into the mirror without collapsing. They use projection as information about themselves, treating it as an opportunity to grow rather than a reason to defend. This typology becomes a map of growth potential. The unconscious type is rigid. The defended type is stuck in self-observation without transformation. The integrated type moves toward consciousness, using every conflict and criticism as raw material for growth. And this is where the integration test becomes not just a tool for reading others, but a practice for yourself. Every time you feel judged, every time your mask is threatened, every time you catch yourself criticizing someone with unusual intensity, you are being offered a mirror. The question is, will you smash it in denial, or will you dare to look? Carl Jung believed that awareness without practice is useless. You can understand the theory of shadow projection. You can nod your head at the idea of the persona cracking under pressure, but unless you apply these insights to daily life, they remain abstract. Consciousness is built through repetition, through small moments of catching yourself in the act and choosing differently. That's why the most effective way to integrate Jung's framework is not through reading more, but through deliberate exercises. Think of it as training the psychological muscle of self-awareness, the 7-day shadow journal. For 1 week, keep a notebook dedicated to your reactions. The rules are simple. Capture the trigger. Each time someone irritates you, frustrates you, or even inspires you with unusual intensity, write it down immediately. Don't justify it. Don't explain it away. Just record, "I was annoyed when he interrupted me," or "I felt jealous when she got recognition." Describe the emotion. Be precise. Was it irritation, anger, embarrassment, envy, admiration? The sharper you name it, the clearer the pattern becomes. Ask the mirror questions. Where might this trait exist in me? What part of me feels threatened by this quality? What do I secretly long for that this person expresses? Notice the intensity. The stronger the emotional charge, the closer it is to your own shadow. Neutral observations don't reveal much. But when you feel your pulse quicken, when you can't stop thinking about someone's behavior, that's gold. By the end of 7 days, you'll begin to see patterns. The people who annoy you are rarely random. They cluster around the same themes: insecurity, arrogance, neediness, dishonesty, overconfidence. Each cluster points directly to the qualities you've buried, denied, or longed to express. The live drill, the pause before reaction. The second practice is done in real time. Jung said, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. Our instinct is to react instantly, with judgment, defensiveness, or denial. The live drill interrupts that reflex. The next time you feel triggered, do 3 things. Pause. Literally take 1 breath before responding. This single breath creates a gap between the unconscious impulse and the conscious choice. Label. Silently name what you're feeling: defensive, jealous, insecure, angry. Labeling reduces intensity. It turns raw emotion into information. Reframe. Ask yourself, what if this reaction is about me, not them? What if this is my shadow showing up? Even if you can't see the whole truth in the moment, this reframing shifts the focus inward instead of outward. The combination of the journal and the live drill creates a cycle. The journal trains you to see patterns in hindsight. The live drill helps you catch them in the moment. Over time, you'll move from recognition after the fact to awareness in real time, and finally to conscious choice. This is the process of integration. It doesn't mean you stop judging or defending. It means you notice when you're doing it, and that awareness gives you freedom. Jung wrote, "We don't really heal anything, we simply let it go." Integration is about letting go of automatic reactions so that authenticity can take their place. By the end of a single week, most people are shocked at how much of their inner world is revealed by their own judgments. And once you see the shadow, you can't unsee it. The question then becomes, will you use this insight with compassion, or will you turn it into a weapon? Jung warned that psychological knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands. To see through the mask, to recognize shadow projections, to read character through unconscious patterns, these are powerful skills. But power without humility quickly becomes poison, and Jung saw this danger clearly. People using insights not to understand, but to dominate. This is where the ethical dimension comes in. The same framework that can deepen compassion can also be twisted into a weapon. I call this distortion shadow hunting, the tendency to use Jung's ideas to expose, shame, or manipulate others instead of understanding them. Think about what happens when someone weaponizes shadow mapping. They take a person's projection and throw it back at them with judgment. See? You only hate arrogance because you're insecure. Or they watch for moments when the mask slips and pounce. I knew you weren't really confident. Look at how defensive you just got. On the surface, this looks like insight, but in reality, it's cruelty disguised as awareness. Jung was explicit about this risk. He wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. Sometimes, the obsession with analyzing others is actually a defense, a way of avoiding self-examination. By hunting shadows in others, we protect ourselves from looking into our own. Here are the warning signs that you've slipped from genuine awareness into shadow hunting. Superiority. You feel smarter, wiser, or above the person you're analyzing. Insight becomes a way to inflate your ego rather than build connection, manipulation. You use what you know about someone's shadow or defenses to control them, pressing their triggers to get what you want. Judgment. Instead of responding with curiosity, you become critical, mocking, or condescending. You treat the unconscious as evidence of weakness rather than humanity. Avoidance. You spend more time dissecting others than examining yourself. Every insight is directed outward, never inward. The antidote is what Jung called an ethical relationship to the unconscious. It means using psychological insight not as a weapon, but as a bridge. When you notice someone projecting, you don't shame them. You listen for the pain beneath the projection. When you see a mask slipping, you don't attack. You allow space for authenticity to emerge without fear. Remember, every mask is a form of protection. Every projection is a cry from the unconscious, an attempt to cope with something unresolved. When you see these patterns, you are looking directly at someone's vulnerability. To exploit that is to wound. To honor it is to connect. Jung wrote, "The healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers." Shadow hunting is the act of the tortured, those who use insight to inflict pain rather than to heal. The goal of character assessment is not to expose, humiliate, or dominate, but to understand. To see someone's unconscious patterns clearly should make you more compassionate, not more arrogant. In the end, the ethics of insight come down to a single principle. Treat every person's shadow as you would want your own to be treated, with honesty, but also with care. Because the moment you start using Jung's tools to control others, you've lost the very consciousness you were trying to cultivate. Carl Jung believed that the ultimate purpose of character assessment is not to expose others, but to awaken yourself. Every time you observe another person's projections, every time you witness their mask slipping, you're also being handed a mirror. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." This is what I call the mirror effect. It is the unavoidable realization that the patterns you spot in others exist in you as well. The judgments you make, the people who trigger you, the qualities you admire, and the masks you notice, all of them are reflections of your own unconscious. Think about the people who bother you the most, the colleague whose arrogance grates on you, the friend whose neediness feels suffocating, the stranger whose dishonesty leaves you seething. According to Jung, these are not coincidences. They are clues. Each strong reaction reveals something unresolved in your own psyche. Their arrogance mirrors your struggle with confidence. Their neediness mirrors your discomfort with your own needs. Their dishonesty mirrors the ways you avoid truth in yourself. But the mirror effect doesn't stop with irritation. It also appears in admiration. When you place someone on a pedestal, when you say she's so creative or he's unbelievably confident, you may actually be projecting your own undeveloped potential. The qualities you obsess over in others are often the ones you've neglected in yourself. You notice them not because they are foreign, but because they are familiar, latent within you, waiting to be claimed. This is why certain people feel strangely familiar, even when you've just met them. Jung described this as the recognition of archetypes, universal patterns that resonate with your own psychological structure. The mirror effect explains why we click instantly with some people and feel irrationally hostile toward others. They are activating parts of us that we have either integrated or denied. To make this practical, consider keeping track of the people who trigger the strongest reactions in you, whether positive or negative. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with them?" try asking, "What does my reaction to them reveal about me?" This shift transforms every interaction into an opportunity for self-awareness. Every judgment becomes a message. Every irritation becomes data. Every admiration becomes a hint about your own hidden potential. I experienced this myself when working with someone whose constant need for validation drove me crazy. I judged them as insecure, attention-seeking, desperate for approval. But when I applied Jung's lens, I realized my reaction said more about me than about them. I too had subtle ways of seeking validation, through productivity, through being seen as competent, through receiving recognition I told myself I didn't care about. Their behavior wasn't just annoying. It was a mirror reflecting back my own unacknowledged hunger for approval. That realization was uncomfortable, but it was also liberating. Because once I saw it, I could no longer project it outward. I had to own it. And owning it gave me a choice, to stop pretending I was immune to validation, and instead build a healthier relationship with it. This is the deeper gift of the mirror effect. It teaches you that every person is your teacher. The ones you dislike show you your shadow. The ones you admire show you your potential. The ones who trigger you most reveal the exact places where your unconscious is demanding to be seen. Jung's framework is not just about reading others. It's about recognizing that every observation is also a reflection. And the more you accept this truth, the more each interaction becomes an invitation to consciousness. Carl Jung never promised that self-awareness would be easy. In fact, he warned that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. To see your own projections clearly, to admit the ways your persona cracks under stress, to face the shadow you've spent years denying, all of this is uncomfortable. But discomfort is not the enemy. It is the beginning of transformation. Integration doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds in stages. Like a staircase, you climb one step at a time. And each stage has its own traps, its own lessons, and its own opportunities for growth. Stage 1. Blindness. At this stage, you are unconscious of your patterns. You believe your judgments are objective, your reactions justified, your persona real. If someone points out your shadow, you deny it immediately. If your mask slips, you scramble to repair it and pretend nothing happened. Life feels repetitive because the same conflicts keep happening, but you never realize you are the common denominator. Stage 2. Recognition in others. Here, you start to notice projections and persona slips, but only in the people around you. You become skilled at analyzing your colleagues, your friends, your partner. You can spot hypocrisy, defensiveness, and shadow material with clarity, but you remain blind to your own. Jung warned that this stage is dangerous because it tempts you into superiority. You feel insightful, but you're still unconscious of how much you're projecting outward. Stage 3. Intellectual awareness of self. Eventually, the mirror effect catches up with you. You begin to see your own patterns, at least on the surface. You might admit, yes, I judge people too harshly, or I know I get defensive when criticized, but the awareness is mostly intellectual. Emotionally, you still feel justified. You confess the shadow in theory, while still enacting it in practice. Stage 4. Real-time catching. This is the turning point. You begin to notice your projections and defenses as they happen, not just after the fact. You feel the irritation rising, the defensiveness forming on your tongue, and in that split second, you recognize it. You might not always change your reaction, but you see it. This gap between stimulus and response is where consciousness is born. Stage 5. Conscious response with practice. The gap grows wider. You pause before lashing out. You breathe before deflecting blame. You admit insecurity instead of projecting it. This is not perfection. You still feel the old impulses, but you are no longer controlled by them. Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing forces within yourself until something new emerges. At this stage, your persona and your authentic self begin to align. The mask no longer hides the truth, it reflects it. You are consistent in public and in private, under pressure and in calm. This is individuation, becoming whole, not by eliminating the shadow, but by integrating it. The journey through these stages is not linear. You may recognize your patterns one day and fall into blindness the next. You may catch yourself in one area of life while remaining unconscious in another. But over time, the overall trajectory bends toward awareness. Each trigger becomes an invitation. Each defensive slip becomes an opportunity. Each painful confrontation with your shadow becomes raw material for transformation. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The difference between a good life and a bad life is how well you walk through the fire." The fire is not external. It is your own shadow, your own defenses, your own unconscious patterns. To walk through it consciously is to turn pain into wisdom. Carl Jung believed that individual transformation doesn't stop with the individual. When one person becomes conscious, their awareness inevitably radiates outward, altering the dynamics of every relationship they touch. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." In other words, your integration doesn't just change you, it changes the people around you. This is the phenomenon I call consciousness contagion. It begins subtly. Imagine you've done the work of shadow journaling, of catching your defensive reflexes, of pausing before projecting blame. The next time someone lashes out at you, instead of retaliating, you breathe. Instead of meeting hostility with hostility, you respond with calm. That single choice shifts the interaction. The other person senses something different, even if they can't articulate it. They may escalate at first, because your refusal to play the old game unsettles them. But eventually, your presence plants a seed, the possibility that another way of relating exists. Think of family dynamics. In many households, arguments follow the same predictable script. Someone criticizes, someone defends, voices rise, silence follows. But when one person refuses to follow the script, when they pause, reflect, and respond instead of react, the pattern breaks. Over time, others adjust. Children model the new behavior. Partners soften. What was once unconscious drama becomes conscious dialogue. The same is true in workplaces. A defensive manager who is confronted by an integrated colleague may realize for the first time that criticism doesn't have to be war. A team where one person owns their mistakes openly often becomes a team where others feel safe to do the same. Vulnerability spreads. Authenticity multiplies. Integration becomes cultural, not just personal. This is the hidden power of Jung's framework. It doesn't just create better individuals, it creates healthier systems. When you refuse to project your shadow, you stop feeding cycles of blame. When you acknowledge your defenses instead of denying them, you create safety for others to do the same. When you show up consistently, persona aligned with self, you model what authenticity looks like in action. And others, consciously or not, begin to imitate it. But there's a paradox here. Not everyone will welcome your consciousness. Some will feel threatened. If their identity depends on unconscious patterns, on projection, manipulation, or mask maintenance, your refusal to play along may feel like a loss of control. They may resist, escalate, or even withdraw. Jung cautioned that consciousness often leads to loneliness because it separates you from the collective patterns people unconsciously cling to. Yet even this loneliness has a purpose. It clears the ground for deeper, more authentic connections. The people who remain, or the ones who are drawn to you, are those who are ready, consciously or not, to move toward integration themselves. They feel your steadiness, your refusal to be pulled into unconscious games, and it awakens something in them. This is how change spreads, not through preaching or forcing, but through embodiment. You don't tell people to face their shadow, you face your own. You don't demand others drop their mask, you drop yours. You don't insist that people react differently, you simply react differently yourself. And in doing so, you create the conditions for transformation around you. Consciousness, in this sense, is viral. It is transmitted not through words, but through presence. People feel it. They sense the difference. And once they've experienced it, even briefly, it becomes harder for them to return to the old unconscious patterns. This is why Jung believed that individual integration was the foundation of collective transformation. One awakened person becomes a catalyst. A family changes. A team evolves. A community begins to shift. The ripple spreads outward. We began this journey with Carl Jung's discovery that two hidden windows, shadow projections and mask breakdowns, reveal a person's authentic character. Along the way, we explored how judgments expose disowned traits, how stress fractures the persona, and how the integration test can distinguish denial from growth. We saw how every trigger is a mirror, how transformation unfolds in stages, and how consciousness spreads like a quiet contagion through relationships and communities. Now it's time to close the loop. These insights are not meant to turn you into a psychological detective, dissecting the flaws of everyone around you. Jung warned repeatedly that obsession with analyzing others can itself become a defense, a way of avoiding your own shadow. The true purpose of these tools is not to expose others, but to awaken yourself. Think back to the two windows. The people you judge most intensely are showing you the parts of yourself you've rejected. The moments when your mask slips are showing you the parts of yourself you've tried to hide. Together, they are invitations to wholeness. Every irritation, every defensive outburst, every crack in the persona is an opening into self-knowledge. Jung wrote, "Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. this is the lifelong work, to face what you've buried, to integrate what you've denied, to allow your persona and your authentic self to align. Not so you can be perfect, but so you can be real. And here's the paradox. The more you accept your own contradictions, the more compassion you gain for others. When you see someone projecting, you recognize the pain behind it. When you watch a mask break, you understand the fear it's covering. When you feel your own judgments rising, you know they are clues, not verdicts. Consciousness doesn't make you harsher, it makes you more human. This is why the ultimate character you are developing is not someone else's, but your own. Every projection you catch, every defense you soften, every shadow you integrate makes you more whole. And in becoming more whole, you give others permission to do the same. Jung believed that this is how collective transformation begins, not with grand movements, but with individuals daring to confront their own unconscious. So, here is the next step. Don't just analyze this framework, practice it. Keep a shadow journal for a week. Catch your reactions in real time. Notice the micro moments when your mask slips. Reflect on the people who trigger you most and ask what they reveal about you. And above all, use these insights ethically as tools for compassion, not weapons for judgment. If you've made it this far, you already sense the truth. The journey toward authentic character is not about fixing others, but about becoming conscious yourself. Every day offers you a choice to project or to reflect, to defend or to integrate, to react unconsciously or to respond with awareness. And if you're ready to keep walking this path, there's more to explore. In the next video, we'll dive into one of Jung's most haunting insights. What happens when an empath absorbs the shadow of a narcissist and survives? It's a journey into darkness, but also into resilience, transformation, and the deeper meaning of psychological growth. Until then, remember, the two windows Jung discovered don't just reveal others, they reveal you. Watch for the shadows. Notice the cracks in the mask. And above all, dare to look in the mirror, because the ultimate character you're shaping is your own. If you found value in this journey, subscribe now, and let's keep exploring the hidden depths of the mind together.